I never imagined that my 68th birthday would fall on Thanksgiving Day, or that it would be the last time I'd ever step foot in the house I'd helped my son build with my own 2 hands. Dad, we need to talk. Brian stood in the doorway of the guest room where I'd been staying for the past 18 months, since the accident that took my wife Claire. His wife Jessica hovered behind him, arms crossed, that pinched expression on her face I'd come to know so well. I looked up from the photo album I'd been flipping through. Pictures of Claire and me at various Thanksgivings over the years. The turkey I'd burned in '92. The year Brian was 6 and insisted on making the stuffing himself. Better times. What's on your mind, son? Brian wouldn't meet my eyes. Jessica and I. We've been talking. With the new baby coming and Maddie starting private school, we need the space. The space? I glanced around the small room that had been my world for a year and a half. I'm only using 1 bedroom, Brian. The house has 4. It's not just the space. Jessica cut in, her voice sharp. It's the expenses, your medications, your doctor visits, the special food you need for your diabetes. We're drowning, Robert. Robert? She never called me Dad, not once in the 12 years she'd been married to my son. I've offered to help with costs, I said quietly. My pension? Your pension barely covers your prescriptions, Brian interrupted. He finally looked at me, and I searched his face for the boy I'd raised, the kid I'd taught to use a level and saw, who used to follow me around the workshop asking endless questions about dovetail joints and wood grain. I couldn't find him. We've made arrangements. There's a senior living facility in Gresham. They have a bed available next week. Next week? Brian, it's Thanksgiving. It's my birthday, which is why we wanted to tell you now, so you'd have time to prepare. He pulled an envelope from his pocket. Here's $50 for incidentals. Jessica packed a bag for you. We'll drive you to the transitional shelter tonight. They'll help you get into the facility next week. The room tilted. Shelter? You're taking me to a homeless shelter? On Thanksgiving? It's not a homeless shelter. It's a transitional housing facility, Jessica said, like the distinction mattered. Lots of seniors use them while waiting for permanent placement. I stood up slowly, my arthritic knees protesting. At 68, after 45 years of working with my hands, my body kept score of every house I'd framed, every cabinet I'd built, every hour I'd spent in the workshop teaching my son the trade he'd abandoned for software sales the minute he graduated college. I built the deck on this house, I heard myself say. I installed all the crown molding. I built Maddie's treehouse, her bookshelf, that dining table you're going to sit around today eating turkey. Dad, please don't make this harder. I built this house with you, Brian. Remember? You were 23, newly married, and I spent every weekend for 8 months helping you. I took vacation days to be here when the inspector came. I taught you how to tile that bathroom, and we appreciate it, Jessica said, checking her watch. But that was a decade ago. We need to think about our future now, our children's future. Our children, not my grandchildren. I looked at my son, really looked at him, and saw a stranger. Maybe he'd been a stranger for years, and I'd been too grief-stricken over Claire to notice. Let me pack my own bag, I said. It's already packed, Brian said quickly. We should get going. The shelter stops taking people after 8. The drive across Portland was silent. Rain streaked the windows of Brian's Tesla, a car I'd never understood the appeal of, though I'd nodded approvingly when he'd bought it because that's what fathers do. In the back seat, my overnight bag sat next to Maddie's car seat. I wondered if she'd ask about Grandpa. Probably not. They'd been keeping her away from me more and more lately. Jessica dropped us off at the curb, outside a low brick building in a part of town I didn't recognize. The sign said, New Horizons Transitional Living. Here, Brian thrust the envelope with $50 at me. I'll call you next week about the facility in Gresham. He wouldn't meet my eyes. I took the money, took my bag, and watched my son drive away without a backward glance. The Tesla's taillights disappeared into the rain, and I stood there on the sidewalk, 68 years old, on Thanksgiving, on my birthday, with everything I owned in a discount store duffel bag. I didn't go into the shelter. I couldn't. The thought of spending my birthday in a room full of strangers, of admitting that this was what my life had become, was too much. Instead, I walked. The rain soaked through my jacket, but I kept walking. No destination in mind, just movement to keep the reality at bay. I ended up in Laurelhurst Park. The duck pond was gray under the November sky, and most people had enough sense to be inside on a holiday, preparing feasts with their families. I found a bench under a large oak tree that provided some cover from the rain, and sat down heavily. That's where I was, watching the rain dimple the pond's surface, when I heard a voice beside me. Terrible day for the ducks. I looked up. An elderly man stood a few feet away, leaning on a carved wooden cane. He had to be in his mid-70s, with silver hair and sharp blue eyes behind gold-rimmed glasses. He wore an expensive-looking wool coat and a silk scarf, completely at odds with the park setting. "Yes, sir, I suppose it is," I replied. "Mind if I sit? My driver won't be here for another 20 minutes, and standing in this weather isn't doing my knees any favors." I gestured to the bench, and he sat with a grateful sigh. Up close, I could see the quality of his clothing, the shine of his Italian leather shoes. This was a man with money. Thanksgiving afternoon in the rain, he mused. "I have to assume you have an interesting story. No one chooses to be here instead of at a dinner table unless circumstances have conspired." I laughed, a bitter sound. "You could say that. I'm Samuel." He extended his hand. "Samuel Hartwell. Robert. Bob." I shook his hand, noticing the firm grip despite his age. "So, Bob, what brings you to a park bench on Thanksgiving?" Maybe it was because he was a stranger. Maybe it was because I had no one else to tell. Maybe it was just the kindness in his eyes, the first I'd seen all day. But I told him about Claire's death, about living with Brian, about being driven to a shelter on my birthday because I was too expensive to keep around. Samuel listened without interrupting, and when I finished, he was quiet for a long moment. "I'm sorry about your wife," he said finally, "and I'm sorry about your son. Sometimes the people we raise surprise us, and not always in good ways. I keep thinking I must have done something wrong, raised him wrong, or perhaps you raised him just fine, and he made his own choices as an adult." Samuel tapped his cane thoughtfully against the ground. "Bob, I have an unusual proposition for you. You're going to think I'm eccentric, possibly crazy, but hear me out. I waited. I'm a widower myself. Lost my Martha 3 years ago. I have a daughter, but she's in Singapore with her family. I see her maybe twice a year. I live in a rather large house with staff, but it's lonely, terribly lonely, especially on holidays." He paused. "I'm also in need of someone with carpentry skills. My house is old, always needs something fixed, and I've been looking for someone trustworthy." "I don't understand," I said. "I'm proposing a trade. You come work for me. I provide room and board, a salary, and in exchange, you help maintain my home. Fix things, build things, keep me company." He smiled slightly. "And when my driver arrives in 15 minutes to pick me up from my walk, which I take every day regardless of weather, you pretend to be my nephew Bob, who's come to visit for the holiday." "Why would I do that?" "Because," Samuel said, his eyes suddenly serious, "my driver is also my nephew, Richard. Real nephew. By blood. He's been pressuring me to sell the house, move into a retirement community, let him manage my affairs. If he knows I'm hiring live-in help, he'll fight it. Call it elder abuse, get lawyers involved. But if you're family, visiting for Thanksgiving, it's different. It buys us time." "Us? You need a place to stay. I need someone around who won't treat me like I'm senile or try to get power of attorney. We help each other." He studied my face. "I know it sounds strange, but I'm a good judge of character, Bob. I've built a successful business on it. And I think you're a good man who's had some bad luck." "What kind of business?" I asked. "Furniture, high-end residential and commercial. You might have heard of Hartwell & Co." I had. Everyone in the woodworking world had heard of Hartwell & Co. Their pieces, sold for tens of thousands of dollars, graced the homes of celebrities and executives, museums and hotels. I'd seen their work at a showcase once, had stood in front of a Hartwell dining table and marveled at the craftsmanship. "You're that Samuel Hartwell?" Guilty as charged. And I meant what I said about needing a carpenter. The company's huge now, but I haven't forgotten my roots. I started in a garage, working with my hands. I miss it. Miss being around someone who understands the work. A black Mercedes pulled up to the curb. Samuel stood, offering me his hand. What do you say, Bob? Will you be my nephew for an afternoon? After that, we can discuss the rest. I looked at the shelter coordinates still pulled up on my phone. I looked at my soaked jacket and the duffel bag at my feet. I looked at this strange, elegant old man offering me a lifeline. Okay, I said. Uncle Samuel. His face broke into a genuine smile. Excellent. Richard, he called to the driver getting out of the Mercedes. Look who I ran into. My nephew Bob visiting from. Where was it? Eugene, I improvised, naming a city 2 hours south. Eugene. What a wonderful surprise. Richard was in his 40s, well-dressed, but with calculating eyes that immediately assessed me with suspicion. Uncle Samuel, you've never mentioned a nephew, Bob, haven't I? Well, you know how scattered I get. Martha's side of the family. Woodworker, like I used to be. We've been corresponding about some projects for the house. I invited him for Thanksgiving. The lie came so smoothly from Samuel's mouth that I almost believed it myself. Richard's jaw tightened. I see. Well, we should get you home before you catch cold. The three of us drove in tense silence to Samuel's house in the West Hills. House was an understatement. It was a craftsman mansion, probably built in the 1920s, lovingly maintained and updated. My carpenter's eye immediately caught the details. The exposed beamwork, the built-in cabinetry, the original hardwood floors. Bob can stay in the guest house, Samuel announced as Richard pulled into the circular driveway. Richard, be a good fellow and have Mrs. Chen prepare a plate for him. I'm sure he's hungry. Uncle Samuel, perhaps we should discuss this. Discuss what? A man can't have his nephew visit for Thanksgiving? Don't fuss, Richard. Bob and I have business to discuss anyway. That shipment of walnut that arrived last week, I want his opinion on it. I had no idea what shipment he was talking about, but I nodded along. Richard looked like he wanted to argue, but thought better of it. He helped Samuel into the house, while I grabbed my pathetic duffel bag and followed. The guest house was a converted carriage house behind the main property, small but beautifully appointed with furniture I recognized as Hartwell pieces. It had a bedroom, bathroom, and small sitting area. Compared to the shelter I was supposed to be in, it was paradise. Mrs. Chen, Samuel's housekeeper, brought me a plate of Thanksgiving dinner that was better than any meal I'd had in months. After she left, I sat in the quiet guest house, listening to the rain on the roof, trying to process the surreal turn my day had taken. Around 8, there was a knock on the door. Samuel, changed into comfortable slacks and a sweater. May I come in? It's your house. He settled into the armchair while I sat on the sofa. So, let's talk honestly, Bob. No nephew pretense. I meant what I said in the park. I need help around here, and I'd like to offer you a job. Job, real salary. $40,000 a year plus room and board here in the guest house. In exchange, you maintain the property. Help me with some personal projects in my workshop, and occasionally pretend to be my nephew when Richard gets nosy. Why are you doing this? You don't know me. I know enough. I know you're a craftsman who's fallen on hard times. I know you're honest. You could have robbed me in the park and didn't. I know you're proud. It hurt you to tell me your story, but you did it anyway. He leaned forward. And I know what it's like to be alone, Bob. To have family that sees you as a burden or an asset instead of a person. Martha and I never had children of our own. My daughter is my brother's child. We adopted her when he and his wife died. She loves me, but she has her own life across the world. Richard is my nephew by blood, but he's been circling like a vulture since Martha died, waiting for me to slip so he can take control. What about Hartwell & Co.? Don't you have people there? I sold my majority stake 5 years ago. Kept a seat on the board, but I'm not involved in day-to-day operations. The company's successful, but it's not mine anymore. Not really. I have money, Bob. More than I need. What I don't have is purpose. Or companionship. He met my eyes. I think we can help each other. What do you say? I thought about Brian's face when he handed me that envelope. I thought about Jessica's pinched expression. I thought about the shelter I was supposed to be in. I say, when do I start? How about tomorrow? After breakfast, I'll show you the workshop. I have some ideas for a display cabinet I want to build. That was how I became Samuel Hartwell's carpenter, companion, and occasional nephew. The first few weeks were strange, settling into a routine in the guest house, learning the rhythms of Samuel's household. Mrs. Chen came 5 days a week to cook and clean. A gardener handled the grounds. Richard visited every Sunday, always suspicious, always probing about my background. But Samuel and I found an easy companionship. In the mornings, after breakfast, we'd go to the workshop he'd built in the basement. It was a woodworker's dream. Every tool imaginable, perfectly organized, expensive hardwoods, stacked and labeled. We'd work on projects together, and I rediscovered the joy I'd lost after Claire died. Samuel knew his craft. Despite his age and wealth, he could still shape wood with precision, could still see the potential in a rough board. We built that display cabinet together, and when it was done, Samuel donated it to the Portland Art Museum. Saw it installed there with a small plaque, crafted by Samuel Hartwell and Robert Morrison. Seeing my name next to his in a museum made something tight in my chest loosen. "You're better than you think you are," Samuel told me that day. "Brian was a fool to throw you away." I still thought about Brian sometimes. Wondered if he'd tried to call the shelter. Wondered if he wondered where I was. Part of me wanted to rub my new life in his face. Another part just felt sad for what we'd lost. Months passed. I restored the crown molding in Samuel's dining room, built new shelving for his library, repaired the gazebo in the garden. He paid me promptly, treated me with respect, and slowly, I began to feel less like an employee and more like family. We had dinner together most nights. Samuel would tell stories about building his company, about Martha, about the furniture world. I'd share memories of Claire, of the houses I'd built, of Brian before everything went wrong. "You should reconnect with your son," Samuel said one evening over wine. "Life's too short for estrangement." He made his choice. And people can unmake choices, can change. You'd be surprised how someone's perspective shifts when they realize what they've lost. But I wasn't ready. The hurt was still too fresh. In March, 6 months after I'd moved into the guest house, Samuel called me into his study. Richard was there, looking unhappy. "Bob," Samuel said, "I need to tell you something. I've been diagnosed with pancreatic cancer, stage 4. The doctors say I have maybe 6 months. The room tilted the way it had when Brian told me I was going to a shelter. "No," I said stupidly. "You're healthy. We just built that hall table last week. I've been feeling ill for a while. Finally went to the doctor. It's aggressive, and at my age, they don't recommend aggressive treatment. I'm 76, Bob. I've had a good life." "Uncle Samuel," Richard interjected, "perhaps now would be a good time to discuss your estate planning. Make sure everything's in order." Samuel waved him off. "Already done, Richard. Bob, I need a favor. I want to finish one more piece. A bed frame, king size, walnut and cherry. Will you help me?" Of course. We worked on that bed frame every day for the next 3 months. Samuel grew weaker, but he insisted on being in the workshop, even if all he could do was sit and direct. We inlaid the headboard with an intricate pattern of woods, created posts that were functional art, crafted it with the kind of care that comes from knowing it's your last piece. "It's for you," Samuel told me one day in late May. His voice was thin now, his body frail. "For the guest house. Every craftsman should sleep in something beautiful." "Samuel, let me do this, Bob. You've given me these months. Let me give you something back." In June, Samuel took a turn for the worse. He was moved to hospice care in his home, nurses rotating through 24 hours. I sat with him when I could, reading to him, sometimes just holding his hand. "I updated my will," he said one lucid afternoon. "Richard's going to be angry. You don't have to—" "Shh. Listen. You've been more family to me this past year than Richard's been in 20. You're getting the guest house and its contents, the workshop and all the tools, and a sum of money to make sure you're comfortable. Samuel, I can't accept. You can, and you will. But there's more. Hartwell & Co. I kept a 20% stake when I sold. Those shares are worth approximately $16 million. They're yours. I couldn't breathe. What? You're a craftsman, Bob. A real one. You understand what I built, what it means. Richard just sees dollar signs. My daughter is already wealthy from her mother's family. She doesn't need it. But you can make sure the company stays true to its roots. You'll have a seat on the board. Influence over decisions. Promise me you'll keep them honest. Keep them focused on the craft, not just the profit. I promise, I whispered. And Bob? Call your son. Life's too short. I never got to see my daughter one last time. Don't make that mistake. Samuel Hartwell died on June 23rd, surrounded by loved ones. I held his hand as he passed. This man who'd saved me from a shelter on Thanksgiving, who'd given me back my purpose and my pride. The funeral was large. Furniture, world elite, society people, museum curators. Richard gave a eulogy about his beloved uncle, and I had to leave the room. Mrs. Chen found me in the hallway. He loved you like a son, she said simply. More than Richard. Richard knew it. That's why he resents you. The will reading was scheduled for a week later. Samuel's attorney, a sharp woman named Patricia Zhou, called me the day before. Mr. Morrison, I need to prepare you. Richard is contesting the will. He's claiming you manipulated Samuel, that the bequests to you are evidence of elder abuse. He's filed an injunction to freeze the estate. Can he do that? He can try. But Samuel was very thorough. We have documentation of his mental competence, signed statements from his doctors, video testimony explaining his wishes. Richard's case is weak, but it will make things uncomfortable. The reading was in Patricia's downtown office, a glass tower with views of Mount Hood. I arrived early, wearing the suit Samuel had insisted on buying me for formal company events I'd attended with him. Richard was already there with 2 lawyers. His face when he saw me was pure venom. You son of a bitch, he hissed. You manipulated a dying old man. Richard, Patricia said sharply, we'll discuss this properly. She read the will. Most of Samuel's personal estate went to his daughter in Singapore. Richard received a generous sum, $1 million, and some personal effects. Several charities were named. Then she got to me. To Robert Morrison, who has been more of a companion to me in my final year than anyone had a right to expect, I leave the following. She listed it all. The guest house, the workshop, $200,000 in cash, and the shares of Hartwell & Co. Richard exploded. This is insane. He knew my uncle for less than a year. This is textbook undue influence. Mr. Hartwell, Patricia said calmly, was evaluated by 3 independent physicians in the month before his death. All confirmed his mental competence. He also left video testimony. Would you like to watch it? She played the video. Samuel, thin and weak but clear-eyed, sitting in his study. If you're watching this, I'm gone. Richard, I know you're angry, but Bob didn't manipulate me. He gave me friendship when I was lonely. He reminded me why I loved my work. He asked for nothing and gave everything. The money I'm leaving him is a fraction of what he gave me. Bob, don't let Richard bully you. You earned this. Use those shares to keep Hartwell & Co. honest. Make beautiful things. Live well. And please, call your son. Tell him I said grudges are heavy to carry. The video ended. Richard was red-faced, furious. I'm fighting this. I'll tie this up in courts for years. You can try, Patricia said, but you'll lose, and it will cost you considerably in legal fees. Samuel knew you'd react this way. That's why he was so thorough. Richard stormed out with his lawyers. Patricia turned to me. He'll probably file suit within the week. But honestly, Mr. Morrison, I don't think he has a case. Samuel was very clear about his wishes, and there's extensive documentation. It might take a few months to sort out, but the will should stand. I walked out of that office in a daze. $16 million. A house, a workshop. I was 69 years old and suddenly wealthy, beyond anything I'd imagined. My phone rang. An unknown number. I almost didn't answer. Dad? Brian's voice hit me like a freight train. Brian. Dad, I heard about Samuel Hartwell. Saw the obituary. It mentioned you as a close friend. I didn't know you knew him. I tried calling the shelter, but they said you never checked in. Where have you been? Living my life, I said. I want to talk. Can we meet? Jessica and I, we've been thinking. What we did was wrong. We want to make it right. I thought about Samuel's words. Life's too short. But I also thought about that rainy Thanksgiving night, about being handed $50 and driven to a shelter. How's Maddie? I asked. She asks about you. She misses you. And Jessica? Does she miss me? Or does she miss the free carpentry? Silence. Then, that's not fair. Isn't it? Brian, you threw me away like garbage. On my birthday. On Thanksgiving. You didn't call to check if I made it to the shelter safely. You didn't call on Christmas or my 69th birthday last month. Why now? Because I'm sorry. Because I've been thinking about what I did. Because, he paused, because I saw the obituary listed you as receiving a major bequest, and I realized I didn't even know where you were living or what you were doing. There it was. The truth. So this is about money. No, Dad, I swear it's not about that. I mean, yes, I saw it, but that's not why I'm calling. I've been wanting to call for months. I just didn't know how. I don't believe you, Brian. Dad, please. Just meet with me. Let me apologize properly. Let me introduce you to the new baby. His name is Robert, Dad. We named him after you. That hurt worse than anything. They'd named a child after me while I was living in Samuel's guest house, and they'd never bothered to tell me. I'll think about it, I said, and hung up. I thought about it for 3 days. Then I called him back. Okay, we can meet, but not at your house. Neutral ground. We met at a coffee shop in Selwood. Brian brought the baby, but not Jessica or Maddie. He looked older than I remembered, tired around the eyes. Dad, he started. I'm so sorry. What we did was inexcusable. Yes, it was. I was overwhelmed. The expenses, the stress, Jessica's pressure, but that's not an excuse. You're my father. You raised me, and I threw you out like you were nothing. You did. Can you forgive me? I looked at my son, at my grandson, sleeping in his carrier, and felt the weight of Samuel's words. Life's too short. I can try, I said. But Brian, things are different now. I'm not the same man you dropped at that shelter. I have my own life, my own home. I'm not coming back to be your live-in handyman. I'm not asking you to. I just want you back in our lives. In Maddie's life. In Robert's life. Then you need to know some things. Samuel Hartwell left me a considerable inheritance. I'm financially secure now. More than secure. And that doesn't change anything between us. You don't get to use me, or my connections, or anything else. If we rebuild this relationship, it's because you actually want a father, not a resource. Brian nodded, tears in his eyes. I do want a father. I missed you, Dad. I missed our talks, missed learning from you. I was an idiot. Yes, you were. We talked for 2 hours. It wasn't a fix. You can't repair a broken relationship in an afternoon. But it was a start. Over the next months, I saw Brian regularly. Slowly, carefully, we rebuilt trust. I met little Robert, reconnected with Maddie. Even Jessica apologized, though I could see it pained her. I didn't care. Some things are hard to forgive. Richard's lawsuit was dismissed in August. The shares transferred to my name, along with everything else. I joined the board of Hartwell & Co., and to everyone's surprise, I actually contributed. I knew the craft, understood the market, cared about the quality. The other board members respected me. I kept the guest house, made it truly mine. The bed Samuel and I built together held pride of place. I kept working with wood, building pieces for myself, for friends, occasionally for charity. I didn't need the money, but I needed the work. On Thanksgiving, a year after Samuel found me in that park, I hosted dinner at my house. Brian and his family came. Mrs. Chen came, and Patricia Zhou, and a few other friends I'd made. We toasted Samuel's memory and the strange twists of fate that bring people together. I'm grateful, Brian said during the toast, that Dad's still here, that I got a second chance to be a better son. I'm grateful, I added, for the family we choose and the family we're given. Sometimes they're the same thing, and sometimes we have to learn to tell the difference. Later, after everyone left, I stood in my workshop, running my hand over the tools Samuel had left me. On the wall hung a photo of the two of us, taken 3 weeks before he died, standing beside the bed frame. Both of us smiling, sawdust in our hair, proud of what we'd made together. My phone buzzed. A message from Brian. "Happy birthday, Dad. I love you. I'm sorry I forgot last year. I'll never forget again." I smiled and typed back, "I love you too, son. Not everything broken can be fixed. Not every relationship can be saved. But sometimes, when strangers show you kindness, when second chances appear on park benches in the rain, when you're given the gift of time to figure out what really matters, sometimes that's enough." I was 69 years old. I had a family that was learning to value me, work that fulfilled me, and the legacy of a man who'd seen worth in me when I couldn't see it in myself. Samuel had been right about everything. Life was too short for grudges, and the family you choose can be just as real as the family you're born into. Sometimes, I think, it's even more real.